Thank you everyone for taking the time to be with us. It's truly an honor to be sitting and getting to know these incredible panelists. Over the past few weeks, we've met a number of times, and I'll tell you, I've learned a lot. So a little bit intros. I'm Dan Gallagher. I am with Delivery Leadership at Slalom. My background is in product, mainly from industry. My consulting background is only the past few years, where I've been applying the adapt and inspect aspects of Agile to product discovery to flow into Agile delivery. So with that, I'm going to jump over and ask Nova to introduce herself.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Nova Benedicto, and I am the resident product marketer on the panel. I'm a product marketer for Jenzabar, and most of my experience is in tech, but I've also had experience in the automotive and healthcare industries as well. Thank you.
Thanks. And Taneshia?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Taneshia Camillo-Sheffey, founder and director of MadeINcubator program. We're a business development program for emerging designers based out of Boston. And we're revolutionizing the way designers learn, build, and succeed in fashion. And we are in the business of manufacturing and really helping to mentor and educate the next generation of designers to really scale their businesses. So we are here, and you know, we're here to help and assist in any way as far as the business side in the fashion industry realm. So great to be here.
Thank you. Thanks, Taneshia. Coach AK.
Hey, how you doing? My name is AK Ikwuakor, Coach AK. I'm a former professional athlete turned serial entrepreneur and also speaker. I guess for this call, this session, a little bit my background is I've been involved with a lot of different projects, for-profit, nonprofit, and I currently work for Google in terms of their Google for Startups Accelerator, where I'm advising startups around the world, and also have my own startup called Mobile XA, where we are business coaches and accountability coaches for early stage entrepreneurs.
Excellent. And last but certainly not least, Gary.
Howdy, everybody. My name is Gary Bartos, and I'm the founder of Echobatix, which is a company that started just early this year after 25 years in industrial automation. And my focus is assistive technology for blind people, deafblind people, people with low vision. And for today's talk, I'm going to be focusing more on the engineering perspective.
Thank you, Gary. So we just want to quickly start out with a baselining, or build a shared understanding of the an MVP. In our discussions throughout this process, everyone didn't have exactly the same understanding or definition. So I wanted to kind of just walk through and create a baseline that we can work with. Am I sharing my screen now? Okay.
Yeah.
So this I just want to walk through. There's an illustration that was done by Hendrik Nyberg. It's fairly well known, but I just want to walk through it quickly just to baseline us. In what Nyberg drew was basically looking at a car as an end result. And he drew it in a way that looked at the process to get there. And this top process really does not address, it's how a lot of products are built. It doesn't really address the underlying pain point. He went on to draw a different version of the drawing, which then said, how do we build something that actually addresses the underlying pain point? And what he did was illustrated in a more graphic way the fact that if the pain point is I need to get from point A to point B, then each step of the way, am I allowing that value to be delivered to the user, and can we learn from it? So in essence, the top one, which is a more traditional way to build a product, is focused on building a solution. The bottom one, which is more the MVP approach to a product, is solving a problem. And the way we've looked at that is to say, all right, a MVP is what's the lowest amount of effort to the highest amount of value. That is how we've defined it here. And something that may come up during the process of this is the concept of an MVE, which would be more of a minimally viable experiment, which swaps out value for learning. So what's the lowest amount of effort for the highest amount of learning? And that would bring out a series of MVEs would then inform our MVP and make it more impactful. So an MVP might be a skateboard. An MVE might be testing how thick the wheels on that skateboard need to be. So with that, I was going to start out with our first question. Nova, how do you align the value of an MVP with the user's pain points?
Good question. So I think it really starts with understanding your users at a very specific or granular level. And you can do this through, a series of user interviews. And in these interviews, I think you want to walk away with an understanding of not just what their problems are, but what their expectations are as well. And in that interview, you want to go beyond just knowing who they are from those traditional demographic questions. You want to dig deep into the psychographics, like what are their needs, behaviors, motivations, and fears, and don't be afraid to ask probing questions. Ask things like what are the workarounds that you're using to help alleviate some of those pain points? How would your everyday or your overall situation improve if you had a good solution? And I think by getting granular, what users perceive as their need to solve that pain point will start to rise to the top, and then you and your team can be really focused on which features to start really building for the MVP.
Thank you. Yeah. And also understanding how they're currently satisfying that pain point can also be pretty enlightening as to what they do next. Yeah. AK, thinking about kind of an impactful MVP, can you share with us, your experience, like what you intended to do, how it worked out?
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in a lot of different projects, and I'd say one in particular, I started a fashion company. And for me, I'm a former professional athlete, and it was hard for me to find clothing. So I put together a focus group of just some friends. And our goal was, I just wanted to know what were some of the problems that people were facing, but I realized there's a difference between an idea and an actual execution. So my goal was, how fast could we get from this idea to get a product into somebody's hands to see them actually engage with it? Because once they're able to engage with the actual clothing, if it actually fits their problem, we can then begin to actually iterate, right? So I believe it's really important, how fast can you get it into a market or get into somebody's hands to actually be able to experience it tangibly.
Great. While I go to the next question, Anjali, could you queue up poll 1 so we could start to understand the audience and their perspective a little bit? Okay. I'll just give everyone a second to that, and then I got a question for Taneshia. Okay, Taneshia, I know you've bootstrapped a business. What are your thoughts on bootstrapping a business or bootstrapping an MVP? In a lot of cases, they're actually the same thing.
Yes, absolutely. Good question. It's very important when you're really building a business or building a brand to really look at target audience and like really what your focus is going to be. I know in the fashion industry, there's so many different variables of what you can kind of tap into and what audience you can tap into. But if you're a clothing designer or if you're a shoe designer, it's really important that you're really looking at your target audience and kind of seeing where those people are, looking at price points, looking at materials and how much these things cost. And that goes a lot into really building out the business in itself. And then also really being able to build out an online community, I feel like is definitely important, especially now more than ever with a lot of people still trying to build their businesses during these COVID pandemic times. It can be very challenging, but building an online community is definitely very important because you can reach a broader network if you're going online with your brand and things like that. So I would definitely say the base of any business or anything that you're really trying to grow, to really do some research behind the target audience and who you're trying to target. And also going into cost, cost can be expensive. So really trying to figure out how you can provide, what you're looking to do on a lower scale. And so tapping into your immediate network may be a good thing to see who's around you that may be maybe have done this before, or have people, do you have connections to retailers or manufacturers, or, you know, tapping into your immediate network as well, because those people know a lot of other people. And so I feel like that's important as well.
Great. Gary, I think you're in your third startup. I'd love to hear your impressions on this.
So, yeah, it's the third bootstrap startup. I'm hoping to make this the second of the three that's successful. As Taneshia said, this time of COVID has really changed a lot. Here, starting up a third startup, there's already a lot to think about, but COVID has really focused a lot. And I'll get to more of what I think are the founder/engineering perspectives. I think we get into later talks, but I think a few things that we need to be aware of is, for instance, when we're approaching customers, we're talking to people, especially when we're going online, you know, we want to be aware that everyone is a little bit, I don't mind saying this, agitated. Everyone is a little bit stressed. So it's okay now, even more than before, to, you know, try to break the ice with a little humor. Try to be relaxed. Try to go through informal channels. So more than in the past, I would really recommend going through informal channels. Join a Reddit group. Try to find people that way. Enjoy the group before you introduce that, oh, hey, I'm also looking for information about this. I'd like to talk to you about something.
Excellent. I get a quick comment, but Anjali, would you cue up the next poll? So there's some stuff in the chat here about investing in customer experience, and I completely agree. I heard once a speaker say, and it's really resonated with me, so I'll throw it out there. You build a product from the foundation up. You build an MVP from the sky down. It's an interesting thought, a different play to think about it, where you start with that benefit in the marketplace and you work your way back towards the product that will eventually support it. So let's see, this is actually a question for all panelists, but I think we'll start with Nova. So what are the key drivers in keeping your MVP investment low and your business value high?
So one of the things that I really like using in keeping, you know, cost or expenses high as you're developing your MVP is just like leveraging videos as a great way to communicate with those users. I really, especially as a product marketer, I love using explainer videos to demonstrate the functionality of the product, answer any questions. And I think it's also a great way of doing things at scale when you really don't have time or the resources to talk to the individual users at once. So it's a really good kind of bootstrappy way to communicate the value of the product, explain the who, what, where, and why, and how, and really make sure that the viewer of that particular video has a clear understanding of what the product is, how it works, and if he or she will need it.
Yep. AK?
Yeah, I would say especially today, there's a lot of different ways that you can be able to grow your company, whether you have a product or a service. And, you know, I've done a lot with, we'll say, outsourcing. There's sites like Fiverr where you can get really high quality marketing material, content, executive assistance for relatively not that expensive. You also have Upwork. You have sites that can relatively build a lot of your back end that are relatively cost effective. So I really consider looking at options that are, you know, marketing channels that are less cost effective than traditional what we've used to do beforehand.
Yeah, great. Taneshia?
Yes, I would definitely say that consumers are looking for good value beyond just price. And so I feel like including in your business, you know, having great packaging, having ways of, you know, contests for, you know, consumers and people that are shopping your brand or your business, having ways that they can kind of be involved more personally, and also tapping into other networks. And so if you're, let's just say fashion, if you're a fashion brand, you may want to reach out to like fashion influencers and maybe partner with a entertainment organization to kind of dress, you know, if there's a big entertainer coming to town, you might want to dress them and reach out to their PR people to see if you can, you know, get involved with maybe dressing them. And so I would definitely say reaching out into tapping into other industries that complement your industry is a huge way of building a business and really getting awareness out there when your network might be small and you want to really branch out. And so I know that's what we've done in our business. We partnered with a lot of organizations and really was able to tap into their network, and they were able to tap into our network, and one hand washes the other. So I definitely feel like it's something where both businesses are able to benefit and you can really grow fast that way.
Great. Now, Gary, you have some experience with landing pages, is that right?
Me, not so much. I was going to mention more SurveyMonkey as a tool to reach people.
Right, okay.
So, especially when you're working on MVP, you need to be, and I'm again addressing this really to engineers who like to keep their heads down, you really need to be in contact with your prospective customers, your user base, much more frequent basis. So one way to reach them is via something free. So we're talking about keeping our costs under $100. SurveyMonkey is free as long as you use, I think it's below 10 questions. And I would recommend that you spend $5 of your 100 to get the Survey Playbook by Matthew Champagne. So figure out, where you're going to invest your time. So you're going to find out who are your early adopters, and you're going to write your questions to figure that out. And once you get to the end of your survey, you're also going to figure out, who can I invite to a one-on-one discussion, so that every week as you're developing, you're constantly asking questions to figure out, is the business, not the product, but is the business going the right direction? Are we identifying the right segment?
Great. I know in the book, Lean Startup, Eric Ries outlined something called the Wizard of Oz MVP, which, and he uses a great example, which is Zappos, where everyone might remember that Zappos was a shoe site before it actually got acquired for over $1 billion from Amazon. And the Wizard of Oz MVP was that what the founder would do is he had no assets. He went down to the store and photographed shoes and put them online. And if someone bought them, he went downtown, bought the shoes, and shipped them to them. And that was his MVP. It was called the Wizard of Oz because don't look behind the curtain, because there is absolutely nothing there. But he used technology to alleviate bottlenecks as they arose. So I couldn't keep running down. So eventually he running down to the store and getting, so eventually started pulling in his own inventory and grew it from there. So there's a lot of simple ways. If you focus, again, back to that original drawing that we talked about, focus on getting from point A to point B, solving the user's pain point, as opposed to just building a solution. Big difference between building a solution and solving a problem. AK?
Well, I'm going to talk about this as well. I mean, right now, I do some work with Google, and you can use search engines, right? You can identify and to see if there's even traction to begin with. And when we're talking about the landing page, you can have an offer, right? That leads them into a process and say, well, I'm noticing that I'm getting traction. People are responding. People want to sign up for these pre-orders, even though you might not even have the company in existence, but you can at least be able to test whether there's interest before you even develop an initial product, or even in the beginning stages of the idea.
Right. Actually, I was at a company called Network World about 15 years ago. We noticed that it's a site about, it's editorial about IT and networking events, networking equipment. And we noticed that when anyone wrote an article about buying a server or buying a router or anything, traffic's really spiked. So we just put links in the side of the set nav bar. We're thinking we should be buyer's guides, but instead of doing that, we just put links in the nav bar, looking to buy a server, looking to buy a router. And then we clustered articles. They went to landing pages. And it took us about an hour. It took us like $50 to do it. And traffic flowed. And eventually we evolved it more and more and more. And we ended up with these really rich, high revenue buyer's guides, which brought in a lot of revenue, which zero risk because we just built it slowly over time. So there's a lot to be done based on assets that are readily available. So the poll, it looks like from a size standpoint, we're skewing heavily towards this minus 10 or under. So it looks like we're skewing smaller in the company standpoint. And the experience level with MVPs is kind of three. A lot of people in the audience have actually built MVPs. So that's kind of helpful to know. Okay, questions for everyone, but I want to hear from Gary and AK. How do you decide when to prototype versus MVP versus beta?
AK, you want to go first, or should I?
Yeah, I can go. It's fine. I think a lot of it depends. I think a lot of it depends on the entrepreneur and what your overall end goal is. Now, if you have a short runway, right? You don't have a lot of finances and you are looking to bring some additional income, then I would say don't even prototype. I would say just get the product as fast as possible to market to start bringing in revenue. But let's say you're looking for an investment, right? They may need a prototype, right? So I think a lot of it depends on the entrepreneur and the end goal, because if you don't have a lot of resources, spending money on a prototype may actually hurt you to actually get your product off the ground if you're not looking for an investment.
Great. Gary?
Sure. And I want to, someone's asking about the book, the survey book. So it's the survey playbook here. I'm holding it up for the screen for those who can see it, by Matthew Champagne. So survey playbook, you'll find it. It's a great short book. So another thing, so quite a different angle than what AK was talking about. There is, I think, even a technical consideration, whether you decide you follow, say, a more traditional development path versus an MVP. And it can be, are you developing something that is safety critical or health critical? In which case you may not be able to show, incremental development or say, hey, we've got a partial something. It maybe you get one chance in front of somebody to prove that we have, the new product that you need for your production line, for your health services, whatever. And the other one is, this is a judgment call, is you will encounter people, they may even be early adopters, who, when they see something, they think this is it. This is what they're going to get. And if you can recognize that there is someone like this, generally, yes, this is not someone you want to pitch an MVP to, but there are occasions when you really have to have something more developed. But usually you'll find a way to sneak in an MVP. Say, hey, we have a demo for you, call it something else. We want to show you one of the features, but that's actually an MVP in your own terms.
Excellent. Taneshia, Nova, do you have any other thoughts? Okay. Anjali, could you cue up the third poll as we get into everyone's favorite topic, failure? But just an additional note, what I find interesting about MVP is the minimum and viable, that as creators, you're responsible for the minimum. You define what minimum means. The viability is determined by your user base. So you have to be careful. And so that kind of factors into when you understand, when is it ready? Are we ready to move from a prototype to an MVP? Or are we beyond the MVP? We're actually building the product from the ground up in the form of a beta. So one of the hallmarks of MVPs tends to be failure. And define failure as you will, but I want to talk a little bit about that. So Taneshia, how have you dealt with failure of MVPs?
Good question. So yes, as growing a business and having a business as an entrepreneur, you are definitely going to fail. And I really look at it as failure, really taking failure as an opportunity to grow. Because when you fail, you kind of know what you did wrong and you're not going to repeat that again. Hopefully, you're not going to repeat it again. And so I feel like, once you fail, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to go through that again. Okay, how can we work through this? How can we go to the next thing? And so I feel like with doing that, you're really growing a whole lot in your business. You're coming up with new ideas. It's forcing you to kind of come up with new ideas and reinvent whatever it is that you're trying to make work. And I feel like even with my recent conversation with Tommy Hilfiger, I interviewed him for my event, and he was even talking about his failures and all the things that they've had to do as a brand to really pivot during these COVID times. And it was just remarkable how they've had to do this as a billion-dollar business, how they've had to really make these changes in order to kind of stay with the times. And so it just goes back to everyone is in the same position. If you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to build a business, expect to fail. Take it as, okay, if once I fail, I'm going to learn from this and I'm going to get even better at it, and just really take it as an opportunity to grow.
Excellent. Important topic. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this? Okay. I think I'm sorry, was someone going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, as an athlete, we're always failing, we're always learning. And as a startup, you're only going to know what you know, right? And so Taneshia said this well in terms of pivoting. You are actually not trying to find out what doesn't work, you're trying to find out what does work. And the faster you can know what doesn't work, i.e. failure, the faster you're gonna know what is working. And if you're not failing, I think you need to push yourself more to find more failures, and you're probably around people that are just yes people, right? You need to be around people that are gonna say, you know what, not the best idea.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
Or you're gonna have people that are being really critical with you, you're gonna grow just as much as your company is gonna grow.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, I think a well-executed MVP where insight is gained is never a failure. I mean, hypothesis, I always look at it, hypotheses fail. But MVPs, if you learn something, weren't a failure. And it's this quicker you find out that your hypothesis was a failure, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, I would add one thing, 'cause Dan, besides you'd mentioned in a previous call, you know, failure as a prerequisite to learning, which is something that Taneshia and AK both mentioned, but I'd like to pose as a counterpoint is, imagine that you guess something right. So you haven't failed, but you don't know why. This is actually worse. So if you fail, customer doesn't want it. What you expressed, what you tried didn't work. But that's actually better. Now you know something. AK was just talking about, you know. But when you guess and you happen to guess right, it's a mystery. That's actually, that can be catastrophic later on.
Yeah. And that's where MVEs, or minimum viable experiments, can help. If you say you accomplished what you did, but you're not quite sure why, then experimenting is to understand that better is a really helpful way to do it. So I want to talk a little bit more about audience. This is really for the whole panel, but I want to start with Nova. So how do you find the right audience, Nova, for an MVP?
You know, I think I'm going to echo what Taneshia had said earlier, is really just tapping into your networks. And if you are being really bootstrappy, don't be afraid to proactively reach out to, you know, groups that are already existing. You know, there's many groups on Facebook that could be a certain segment of the user that you're looking for. I think that's another really great kind of shortcut to finding that audience.
Great. Other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I feel like people are really embracing shopping local more. And I see that 72% of our audience has about 1 to 10 employees. And so I feel like shopping local and really being able to tap into your community and where you are. And like Nova said, and like I said before, you know, into your network. And so I think creating some really cool creative experiences for your community and for partnering with other organizations in your community can really deeply benefit your business and your brand. And so I think looking into that and, you know, those types of things you might not be thinking about before, but now, you know, during these times and even before these times, I think just thinking out of the box and being creative with how you come up with new products and services and new ways to get people involved in the community, I feel like that's a winner for everyone. So.
Right. Gary, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I would say briefly, in your network of contacts, friends, colleagues, and whatnot, you probably know somebody who is one of these hyper-connected people, and everyone knows it. Even if they're in an entirely different industry than your business, there's a really good likelihood that they know somebody who knows somebody. I've been introduced to multiple people through 3 hyper-connected advisors. So if you know the game 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, how do you connect any actor to Kevin Bacon? I have what I call 3 degrees of Denise and 3 levels of Lindsay. 2 friends who they're very outgoing. They just happen to know literally everybody. So let's assume they're already your friends. Find these people and just tell them, you know, it has nothing to do with your business. Tell them, this is what I'm working on. Do you know someone who knows somebody? Or do you think you know somebody? And you'll find you'll meet a lot of people this way.
Right.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that as well. I mean, it's becoming easier and easier with technology, especially with Facebook and Google, is they've been able to capture a lot of information and data on our ways in which we navigate through the internet online, right? Whether about how long we're looking at YouTube videos, how we're sending our emails. They're able to get a lot of this information. So you could go online and you can even search in something called like life events. For example, you can be able to target people that are just about to get married, that are just moving. And you could actually use that data to actually do some A/B testing to identify which market is actually interested in whatever offer you're trying to build. So I would say right now, especially with Google, what I'd recommend is what's really good with them is that they do CPCs, cost per clicks, right? Instead of CPMs where it is impressions. So meaning you can put out something on a Google ad, and the only time that you will be charged is when somebody clicks on it, right? And the reason why that's valuable is that you'll be able to, why Google is so good is because it is a search platform, right? Meaning at the exact moment that somebody's thinking of an idea, like I need to get a haircut, for example, it will give me the solution at the exact same time that I need to make that buying decision. So I would say using software like Facebook with Google, where they already have this information already ready. They also have something called market insights, where you can actually identify what market would be best for your product. So you don't have to always reinvent the wheel. People have already done it. They already have the data and they already have the information. So I'd say thinkwithgoogle.com is another one that I can think of that would actually be really helpful.
Great. I'm gonna ask a follow-up because I think there's more meat on the bone here. But and after that, Dorothy, I think you asked a really good question. We'll get to that. So as we discussed in the beginning, MVPs can be rough. And if someone's expecting a car and you hand them a skateboard, that could be a little rough. I'd like thoughts on communication with the audience participating in MVP, on helping them understand that what we have here is designed to address your basic need. It will get better. And actually leave the question at that and throw it out to anyone.
See, be forthright, be blunt, and I said before, try to be a little funny. Get people easing into it. So just let them know. It's like, hey, we're going to, a friend of mine had said, let them know. It's like, we're going to put something in a plastic bag, in a box. You're going to get it via, the USPS, and it might be a little dinged up, and then you go on from there. So you actually set low expectations, and a little humor helps.
I think another way to kind of get, I don't want to say empathy or anything like that, but I think another way of level setting is to also be honest with the users, to also say, like, we're giving this to you because we value your feedback, that you're kind of giving them some kind of weight and power, that their feedback is going to be immensely helpful for you and your team to be able to develop what the next iteration of that particular product is going to be.
You're right. It's important to note here that people aren't using your product because they want to use your product. They're using it because there's a value, a benefit, an outcome that they want. Your product is a ways to an end for them. To make them feel like they're kind of a development partner in creating the outcome that they seek is a good way to get them on your side, to make them feel like they're invested in making you succeed because it will benefit them. You'll find a lot of people are very, very receptive to that. Before we get to the next question, Dorothy asks, developers can be very resistant to MVPs because they like to add features, etc. And yet we stakeholders are really dependent on them to create MVPs. Any thoughts on getting developers on board? I'll open it to the panel, but Gary, you're our resident developer, so.
Sure. I'd say the first thing you point out to them is how much development costs, and say, we need an answer, and this is try to pose it as this is business learning. We're not trying to find out about a feature, and the opportunity cost of engineering development, we usually estimate as $500 a day. We say, we'd like to get this answer for $100. Throw that back at them. But you do also have to tell developers, you have to get them used to the idea that you're going to be uncomfortable with this. If you're not embarrassed, you waited too long. Reid Hoffman, founder of Netflix, had said that. You really have to get over the idea that you are developing a product that people are going to judge you by it. As engineers, that's what we're trained to do. We're trained to make this perfect, make it optimal, and so on. That is not what an MVP is. It's about learning quickly. And so it's an adjustment. I'm still adjusting to it. I'm used to traditional development, but the value, once you get someone through the process once, I think the value will come clear. But you can put it in monetary terms and hours.
Great. Another way to look at it is that, engineers are great at building solutions, but MVPs are to solve problems. To get the developers focused on solving a problem as opposed to building a solution is the start. And you do that by really getting them to understand what the outcome needs to be. If they want to deliver an output, but it's an outcome that matters. If an output doesn't deliver an outcome, then it's useless. It doesn't matter how good it looks. I heard someone recently say, you can build the nicest butcher shop in a vegan neighborhood. It's not going to do well, right? It's got to be done the right way. So, Dorothy, I hope that was helpful.
Well, and then also, I think to touch on that is there's a difference between what people want, what people need, and what people are willing to pay for, right? You can have a really big need, but if nobody's willing to pay for it, it really doesn't matter. You're not a business. Exactly.
There's a great book of law, you've probably heard about it, Start With Why by Simon Sinek, that really gets into, getting people on board and getting them motivated to do something that matters. Jeff Bezos once said, you don't want mercenaries working for you, you want missionaries working for you. And the way to get them is to get them bought into an idea. Continuing on the kind of the user segments, Nova, what are some of the key considerations in identifying target audiences for an MVP?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to take it back to that concept of being specific with your target audience. I think the MVP stands a much better chance of success when you're trying to, target or solve for a particular group of people rather than casting a wide net and solving for everyone. And that's why segmentation is so important. So looking beyond, again, those demographic characteristics, but create the segments and take the consideration on, what are those groups of users that want the same outcomes or the same things. And I think that's going to leave you with the segment that will most likely end up buying your product in the way that you had designed it.
Okay. Any other thoughts? We did have a question coming on Slido. Someone's looking for thoughts on user interviews on a two-sided market. Is it simply conducting interviews with both groups? I'll throw that out to the group. I'm a little unfamiliar with the two-sided market comment, so if anyone can enlighten me on that.
Do they mean, so I'm two-sided market, so I don't know if they're meaning their actual business and getting feedback on that, and then the consumer market as well. Is it from the same person, like an Uber or Airbnb?
Like an Uber and Airbnb.
Two-sided market, yeah. So I think that they're talking about.
I'm guessing, yeah.
Yeah, building the business.
So it's basically
consumer side.
Yeah. So you have a partner and a consumer, kind of in that.
Yeah. So for me, and for our business, and what's really worked is really figuring out what the consumer needs and what the business side of it needs. And so with doing that, I feel like having surveys and doing pop-ups and really just doing research in the community where you are, where you're based out of. I feel like emails and those types of things have worked for us. And so it might depend on the different market too, in tech and things like that. It might be different, but I know in our market, in our fashion education platform, we've done a lot of surveys and we've gotten a lot of organizations involved to do pop-ups and get feedback from our consumers and things like that. And that's helped us on both ends to kind of see what consumers are wanting and needing, and then also knowing what we need to do in the business side to really market to them. So yeah, so that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I'm not sure if this is exactly what's being asked, but let me just, Amazon has something called the Amazon flywheel. Many of you have probably heard about it, but it was created back around the year 2000 at an offsite, and Bezos during a meeting scribbled a wheel, which basically said, customer experience will drive more traffic, which will drive more vendors, which will drive better selection, which will drive better customer experience. So it was basically a wheel. So the more emphasis they put on each one, the more impact, the faster the wheel will spin, and the more they put more the friction, the more they remove the friction. So the idea that one flywheel kind of takes this two-sided market and embeds it into one is pretty powerful. I'm going to jump to user segments. We'll just kind of finish up users because Nova, I want to ask you, actually, maybe I just asked you this. I did ask you this, never mind. Metrics. Taneshia, Gary, I think we might have lost Gary momentarily. Taneshia, how do you determine the most important metrics?
Yeah, so we work very closely with our, we have a media company that we work very closely with. So anything that we put out, it could be an ad, it can be a new collection, it could be a new educational platform or program that we're doing, workshop, seminar. We work very closely with our media team that follows everything that we need to know. So the demographics of, okay, the age range of what people are looking for, you know, what subjects, you know, people are really needing and what works for us when we provide those type of subjects, and, you know, the attendance rate, all of those things we kind of combined, we kind of look at to kind of develop that. And we work very closely with our team with that. So that's not just me. That's definitely broader than just me with running the business day to day. So I feel like if you're not all the way familiar with something like that with running a business, because when typically if you are running a business and you're a small business, you're having a lot of different, you're wearing a lot of different hats. And so it's important to kind of partner or have that person that you can fall back on to kind of help you, you know, get to those metrics and see, you know, what's working for you and what's not working for you, what people are responding to in that type of field. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You know, AK, sorry.
Oh, this is Gary. If I can
AK,
talk.
did you thoughts here?
Okay.
Oh, Gary, I didn't know you were still here. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I had to go on mute I'll be on mute for a few minutes. But briefly, I'll call back to my idea of, as a metric is the savings of engineering time. If you're working on an MVP with engineers is one. And the other is, and this is more of a meta metric, is you should notice, and please do read the Lean Startup by Eric Ries first or second time, that you should notice from MVP to MVP how long it's taking you to get to the next MVP. So keep track from the time you have an idea that we need to find this out, we need to learn this, how long does it take you to come up with that MVP? If it's weeks, well, it sounds like you're in development mode. Think in terms of days if you can. So I'm gonna be on mute for a little while. Turn it over to AK.
Okay.
Yeah. When we think about it in terms of an MVP, in basic terms is, I mean, entrepreneurship and business has been around since the beginning ages. And I think for most of us, if it's an MVP or just a service, is my goal is how fast can we get to market so we can make our first dollar, right? If you think about everything you have to do to make that first dollar, like, okay, cool. They give you have a product, they give you money, right? What are all the systems that you have to have in place? How are you going to communicate the message to them? How are you going to accept the payment, right? So sometimes we always focus on all the things that we have to do rather than the first thing is, how do we make money? So the first one is, how do you make that first dollar and what do you have to do to get that? That's what I think would be the most important metric. If it's first, you need exposure. If it's first, you need a sales team. If it's first, you need marketing, but just identify what is that you need to make that first dollar and then scale from there.
Excellent. One final thought. I work with a lot of different startups and enterprises. I coach a lot of different teams. There's another way the metrics that I really push for are broken into two categories. There's leading indicators and lagging indicators. Leading indicators tend to be, oh, we launched a product and people are using it. Yay, we win, we did something great. The lagging indicators, and that's much easier to measure, by the way. The lagging indicators tend to be, are we adding value? Are we producing the outcome our users originally set out for us to produce for them, right? Those are harder to measure. They take much longer, but they're much more important, and they will determine longer term what's your, the success of your business. Like an example would be, I worked on an application to work within an EMR system at hospitals where it would help doctors better target drug regimes based on a condition for a patient, right? We launched it, everyone used it, got a lot of usage, excellent, great. Leading indicators were we did a great job. We waited, we watched, and we looked at the lagging indicators, which was, were people actually getting better when this app was used? The answer was no. Until we went back and started adjusting the algorithms and then we actually saw the lagging indicators get better with the leading indicators. So it's important to really understand what outcome are we trying to produce and how do we measure that? So leading indicators aren't bad, but they only are the beginning of the story. They're not the whole story. So I am gonna jump to our question of, see, it's 4:03. So we got a few more minutes. So I'm going to ask this question. We actually had it earlier in the process, and we weren't sure if we needed it, but how do you develop a shared understanding across all stakeholders with an MVP and what it needs to accomplish? Any thoughts on that one? I think the key there is again going to be aligning on an outcome, not an output. You know, and when I say that, an output could be release number 7.3.4 or the release at the end of Q2. The release itself is an output. Whether that release actually produces the outcome that the business and the user needs is a separate question. Aligning the stakeholders on that outcome is easier than trying to align them on the tiny features, the micro features that are in release 7.3. So it's an important way to look at it. And it's important, it's a different, it changes the conversation when you're dealing with stakeholders. Quick question here. A lot of times I get positive feedback on my idea, but I can't convert it to a sale. What should I be asking instead?
I mean, I can touch on this. I mean, I think within business, it's understanding the overall sales cycle. One thing that I always talk about is, you know, features, the bridge, and the benefit. Like a lot of us talk about features, right? I have this nice, this microphone, right? It sounds, it's, you know, dual handle, all black, whatever. But the feature, the benefit is how does it help the user, right? The user, the feature might be, the benefit would be, I'm allowed to, you know, capture my voice in a loud room, but you don't hear anything in the background, right? So the benefit would be, how is it actually benefiting the user? In addition, it would also be like, how do we handle objections, right? You're gonna get certain objections. The question is, how do you be able to handle them when they say no, or I need more time, or give me some more information? Oftentimes what we do is we cower away instead of asking the question like, well, what do you mean that you need more time? What information would you need that would help you move one step closer, right? Or if right now you're at, like, give me from 1 to 10, like how comfortable do you feel with the product? They say 6, and then you ask them like, what would get you to a 10, right? So it's asking questions that's gonna lead them to that end goal without carrying away when they usually say no.
Great.
I'm gonna add to, sorry, I'm just gonna add really quickly to what AK mentioned. I think it's important in that moment too, to kind of look at what the competitive landscape could be. There may be someone that's doing something very similar at, you know, at a smaller price than what you're asking for. So that could be another, you know, reason that you couldn't get that sale.
Right. Excellent.
Actually, a couple
questions came.
The most reason why people don't get the sale is because they don't ask for the sale.
Yeah. A couple questions came in about pivots and when to pivot. Anyone have some quick thoughts on that?
Yes, I feel like whenever you're feeling like something's not working in your business, it's literally simple. So if you're putting something out there, if you're putting a product or an idea out there and no one's biting, you're not, you know, getting your revenues back, or you're just feeling like, you know, you're not growing in any type of way, I feel like it's time to kind of reconsider what your mission and vision is of your brand. Because I know so many brands, and I mentor and educate a lot of brands that are doing the same thing that they've been doing for the past 12, 15 years. And they're not willing to kind of, you know, waver and do different things. And it's like, okay, but this is not working for you, so you need to try something different. And so I feel like realizing that maybe something's not working, maybe you need to switch it up and you know, shake it up a bit and do something different and think outside of the box, like I said before, and really finding different ways on how to do that, you know, drawing inspiration from maybe other business owners and what they're doing, and kind of doing your research and seeing, you know, what's working for them. And just coming up with some really great creative ideas is really what's going to help you to pivot to the next thing, and seeing what industry you're in. If you're in healthcare, maybe it's partnering with doctors and nurses to do something, or partnering with a hospital to provide something, or, you know, even if it's something free, even if it's something that's a service that you're providing for free to get to the next level, you know, provide that service for 6 months. And then after that, charge for the service. Just getting your foot in the door and thinking of different ways to do that is really the best way to pivot.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, and I think that's you're exact spot on, is that, you know, MVPs have an intent. You know, we're trying to learn something. We're trying to validate or invalidate our idea. Once we've invalidated, it's time to pivot. If we've validated it, then it's to take it to the next level. But you got to be clear on what you're trying to learn. That's what helps tell you when to pivot. We only have a couple minutes left. There was one question here. Someone was asking about products in regulated environments, like in healthcare. I'll just quickly say that I spent a lot of time in healthcare. We did a lot of, we would actually build prototypes and go set up a folding table in the cafeteria of hospitals and have doctors or nurses or whoever the audience is come over and give us feedback on those. We couldn't get into the EMR or the EHR systems to prototype and test. We were able to get a tremendous amount of feedback continually. And we just developed this network of partners, hospitals, where we went and they would allow us to do it as much as we wanted. And we used to give out $25 gift cards until one time I forgot them, and it didn't matter. People didn't care about the $25 gift card. They wanted to make things better. So a closing question, and I'll just kind of go around the horn on this one. Nova, we'll start with you. What is the most important lesson regarding MVP that you've learned and you'd like to pass on?
Good question. I think just the concept of quality over quantity kind of comes true here, right? I think the goal isn't the amount of customers or potential customers that you can hit all at once. It's how much you can learn in each of those individual conversations or experiences with each of those users, and then learning to expand as your learnings get validated.
Excellent. Taneshia?
Yes, Nova, I think that that's excellent. And that's kind of what I was gonna speak to, is definitely quality over quantity, and really being able to have a, you know, a way of really translating your vision and your mission to the customer, and doing it authentically, because people, I feel like consumers know if you're not being authentic with them, and really not just being real with them. And so I feel like finding ways to do that, and also, you know, you may have a new business and you may not have a lot of following, but if you have quality followers and people that are really into what you're doing and really want to be a part of what you're doing, so use that to your advantage and get people involved even more to really push your MVP and what you're doing. So yeah, definitely quality versus quantity.
Excellent. AK?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important is testing and iterations. You might have an amazing product, but selling it to the wrong audience, or have the right audience, but having the wrong message. So for example, if I'm out in the desert, trying to sell hot cocoa may not be as effective as trying to sell, hot cocoa in the Arctic, right? But if I'm in the Arctic and I'm even trying to sell snow, well, is that only snow that I'm selling? It might be, hey, we have different flavors, because I know you're probably tired of having the same thing over and over again. But if I'm trying to sell different flavors of snow in the desert, they're like, hey, I'm just thirsty. I don't care if it's lemon, lime, whatever it is, I just want something. So oftentimes we might have this product, but we need to think that, are we having the right message, and also the right audience, and also the right product, making sure that they all align. So I don't want people to give up because they say, this isn't working. Oh, well, test something else out in that user customer journey, because that might be the problem. It may not be the product, it may be the way that you're messaging it, or even the target audience.
Excellent. And Gary?
Yeah, to follow up AK's point is, besides the fact that I would get hot chocolate in the desert, is to really iterate and get those questions answered. And again, I'm going to address this to engineers and perfectionists in particular, is get to your MVP sooner than you think. Think of that $100. What can you do with $100? That's not a lot of time. But make sure this is a real question. You don't know what the answer is. If you're confident what the MVP was going to reveal, what the results are going to be, you waited too long. Make sure this is something falsifiable, that your hypothesis can be a failure or a success. So do it sooner than you're comfortable with if you're used to, polishing everything up nicely.
Nice. And I will just close with, from my perspective, fall in love with the problem, not your solution, right? As soon as you do that and pass that along to your team, you're problem solvers, you're not solution builders, first and foremost. And as soon as you do that, when you're building a solution, your head is down and you're not paying attention to what's going on around you. When you're solving a problem, you're thirsty for more feedback and more input. It's that simple shift which can make all the difference. So we're at time. So I'd like to thank Anjali, who did an amazing job behind the scenes in bringing this incredible panel together. And I'd like to thank this panel. I mean, I tell you, I'm a lot smarter now than I was 2 weeks ago from interacting with you guys over the past couple of weeks. So I thank you very much for your time. And I thank Startup Boston for putting this on and giving us the honor of doing this.